na drugi webinar Crodiaspora i PwC Hrvatske. Radni jezik ovog webinara je engleski, pa ću nastaviti na engleskom. Ako imate bilo kakve pitanje i želite i postaviti na hrvatskom, slobodno postavite u komentarima, ali ne možemo jamčiti da ćemo odgovoriti na vaše pitanje na hrvatskom. So greetings and welcome everyone to this year's second Crodiaspora PwC webinar. I would like to thank PwC Croatia for their continued cooperation, and I would like to announce that John Gašparac, Country Managing Partner at PwC, has been elected as Vice President of Crodiaspora. We are excited to have John as VP, and he has been an integral part of Crodiaspora from its inception. As a still developing country, a significant portion of productive economic activity in Croatia still takes place within the public sector. With this being the case, it is important for investors, especially those from the diaspora, to be able to actively engage with the public sector in Croatia. Because of the still rather centralized business sphere in the country, businesses small and large often depend on government contracts for work. Today, Jelena Drndić, Head of Public Procurement at PwC Croatia, and John Gašparac, no need for an introduction for John, are going to discuss the public procurement process here in Croatia and how to bid for government projects. The increased push to digitize and expedite processes will garner more public-private sector partnerships. As we have highlighted in our Croatian Dream panel at last year's Crodiaspora Summit, online summit, Steve Hrkac and Joe Basic have taken advantage of working with the government and have produced projects that people could have only dreamt of before. So this webinar is being held largely to urge and facilitate the integration of diaspora businesses and business people into the Croatian sphere of economic life and activities. As our diaspora communities continue to produce intelligent, educated, and ambitious Croats, it becomes incumbent upon us as a whole to use our areas of expertise to push Croatia into a modernized and economically focused era. One more thing before we go to John and to Jelena. If you have enjoyed the content that you have seen thus far and would like us to continue the work that we have started, we kindly invite you to donate to Crodiaspora. You can see in the link of this post that you can donate over PayPal. So Crodiaspora is a nonprofit organization based in Zagreb, and its intent is to encourage more business between the Croatian diaspora and Croatia, and ultimately we want to help Croats return to their homeland. If you have any questions about what our plans are, don't hesitate to reach out over either social media, email, or WhatsApp, where you can also find on our Facebook the number. You can donate through PayPal in the description of this webinar. And without further ado, John and Jelena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mate, for the very kind introduction. I appreciate it, and very happy to be part of Crodiaspora as always. Before we get into it, I just want to add on to Mate's comments. Of course, the public sector and the government in particular is a big part of the Croatian economy and has historically been well over 60% of GDP. Undoubtedly, we endeavor to reduce that, not because it's not effective, but we need to obviously diversify where the GDP is coming from, and that's one of the goals we have as any Crodiaspora organization or other organizations that we have here in Croatia move towards a greater market economy. And the only real way to do that is to really bolster the private sector. But to get there, you know, we do have to work with the public sector. And what we want to talk about today is how we can do that. And obviously, anybody working with the public sector is going to represent the private sector, and this is going to help us get there and do it in an effective way. And that's what we have Jelena here today. Jelena, great to have you on. You've been with PwC about a year, working as head of public procurement, and I know I get a lot of communication from you on what's going on. But maybe before we get into the presentation, which obviously we're waiting to see from your side, a little bit of your background. You know, you're at PwC now, but where were you beforehand and your experiences in those areas?
Hello, everyone. Good evening from Croatia. Good morning, I suppose, to some of you as well. Thank you, John, for the introduction. I've been in PwC for almost a year now. But prior to that, I've been working for different companies based in Croatia, but both were actually international companies. I think they're really important for knowing my background because I am expert in public procurement, but I've been dealing with the public procurement from many different angles. So I've been working both for clients in terms of preparation of the tender documents, but I've also been working a lot in business development and bidding. And my beginnings were actually related to an engineering company. So even though I'm a political scientist by educational background, I really needed to go into details of civil engineering. And my previous actually position before getting to PwC was again in one consultancy company, which was more focused to socio-economic topics and areas. So in terms of that, I was also working in the public procurement, but from that a little bit different perspective and a little bit different angle. Since I've came to PwC, I've been working really on a daily basis with procurement issues, both for the public and private sector, and also serving as a public procurement and public sector hub for the PwC.
Excellent. Well, I don't want to hold you up. I think it'd be great that we get into your presentation, and following that, I know I've got a few questions for you, and I'm certain that our audience will also have some questions that will forward to us. So without further ado, please start with the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, John. So, okay, today we're going to talk about public procurement in Croatia. I know that you're here listening and looking at this from all over the world. So first of all, I would like to give you a short introduction of what are we going to talk about today. So basically, to start and to be on the same page, when we're referring to public procurement, we're referring to the procurement of goods and services and works for the public sector, for the public authorities. In Croatia, we have the exact data for 2019. And I can tell you that public procurement is really a big portion of Croatian market and Croatian GDP. As you can see, it was 16.46% of Croatian GDP, which is quite a number. And in terms of the value, that was around 54 billion kunas. And part of that, around 10 billion, 10.5, is from EU funds. As you know, that a lot of EU funds are coming to Croatia. And from today's perspective, I can tell you that this is getting bigger. We are waiting for data from 2020, which is, I assume, actually I'm quite sure of that, is even bigger. So when it comes to the procurement, and if there is some here some participants from the EU countries. In terms of legislation and the whole system, it's very similar to the other EU countries because of the similar legislations. But of course, we have some particularities when it comes to the local implementation of these processes, and but those are not so difficult to catch. Anyway, in terms of the money-wise, we're going to talk about goods and services which are bigger than 200k kunas and works bigger than 500k kunas. The reason behind is that all of those information are transparently published online on one public procurement portal, which I will show you later on, and I will show you which information you can actually get there. As I already said, the contracting authorities behind this are different public sector institutions, ministries, for example, organizations, and then state-owned enterprises. And all of this is actually implemented in Croatian. So official language is Croatian, so all documentation, all contracts, everything, and even the communication with the contracting authorities is in Croatian. But this doesn't mean that companies and experts working and getting these jobs are not foreigners, and people in Croatia and in the ministries and so on are really good in English, and they actually are happy sometimes to even have some external experts. Money-wise, the money that is spent through the public procurement is, of course, comes from the national budget, but again, as I already told you, from the EU funds, and some of our biggest investments are actually funded mostly from the EU funds. I suppose that most of you are familiar, for example, with the investment of Pelješac Bridge, Pelješki Most, which is a quite big one. So it was 3.2 billion kunas was founded through the EU funds, and the rest through the local budget. So in that sense, this works that we're procuring for this, for the building of this bridge, and for example, supervision of this works, everything was actually procured through the process of public procurement. So when it comes to the exact examples, what is actually procured, and I told you already, we're talking about goods, works, and services, and these are the percentages, just for you to have an overview of which percentage of this goes to services. So this is around 22%. Works are like take the biggest part, of course, because they're money-wise, they're the biggest. But in terms of some examples, we are basically procuring everything from the paper and pen for some ministry to, as I already told you, bridges, building bridges, and similar investments. How does it go? So each year, this public entities or state-owned enterprises, they prepare a procurement plan. So on a yearly basis, we can see in this plan what are those goods, services, and works they're going to procure. So what are they going to buy from the suppliers? This, as I already told you, includes all EU investments. So if, for example, as I told you, Pelješki Most, so Pelješac Bridge, was a project actually that is, for example, that is led from the Croatian roads, from the state-owned enterprise, and you could see, even though it's an EU investment, you could see in this procurement plan what are they going to spend the money, what are the Croatian roads going to spend money on in terms of this EU project. So everything was really transparent. So you can actually see what are the key investments here. I have taken out just a few examples of this procurement, and some of them are actually the ones that we were dealing with, and some of them are the ones that we're working on. For example, the second example is the project we have as PwC. We are implementing 2 projects for the State Meteorological and Hydrological Service, and those 2 projects are related to the implementation of the air quality system and the modernization of the weather observation network. And we had many procurements, like hundreds of them. So one very specific, and this might be interesting too, was, for example, we had to procure a lot of, for example, instruments for meteorological stations. We were also procuring works, designs, different softwares, IT softwares for those projects. But this one was really interesting because those were weather sensors for the meteorological stations, and you can see the value is quite big. And those are really specific goods, so specific supplies that we could get just from a few companies in Europe, because we had some European suppliers. But those are not the only examples. There are many examples where you have very particular either expertise or particular goods that people are working with. So if you, for example, have a company for this kind of for supplying this with this kind of goods, then this might be interesting to look at. Moreover, there are a lot of procurements and a lot of projects that are related to digitalization. So one of the procurements that was also published maybe something like 2 or 3 months ago was for the Croatian Health Insurance Fund. So Croatian Health Insurance Fund was working and actually was looking for experts that would prepare and implement the e-system for the whole fund. So basically this is for the implementation of for digitalization of business processes. There was, for example, also one IT procurement that I wrote here under number 3 was a software for analysis and communications in the fisheries sector. Then Croatian Railways had a big EU project under which they were buying 21 electromotor train, and of course there are a lot of, as I said, different procurements for different areas. For example, tourism, where one of our counties was looking for the equipment for eco-tourist trail, and one of the nature parks was building, or they're still building the let's say a museum. So they were basically procuring interior design and setting services for the museum. So this is quite interesting because there's really a variety of this procurements, and on daily basis you can follow what is happening. So I'm going to show you now the platform where you can actually get all this information. It's called, in Croatian it's Elektronički oglasnik javne nabave. In English it would be Electronic Public Procurement Classified. But unfortunately, it's only in Croatian. So for all of you who would like to have English version, you can maybe try with Google Chrome and Google Translate. But I will now open it and show you how does it work and what informations can you actually find there. Just a moment. So this is our procurement portal where you can actually see and this is my daily job. On the left side, you can see what are the procurements that are published each day. So today is Thursday, and I'm clicking here. And under this obavijesti o nadmetanju, I can see that there were 40 procurements today, published today. And basically, there are 2 different ways how you can enter and see those information. I will maybe, I don't know, take, okay, this is an IT equipment, where you can see who is the contracting authority, what are they buying, what is the estimated procurement value. It's $1.5 million. And what are, of course, what is the deadline for submission of your offer. It is usually, it really depends. I will go later on through the whole process so you can see how long does it take, but let's say that approximately 30 to 40 days, but it really depends on the procurement. And under this part, we have the complete documentation. If any of you goes now to this web page, you could see this, but you cannot enter and download this documents. But you can actually subscribe and you can register to this portal. And then you can download all the documents and you can see what is there. So this is the documentation where you can see what are the conditions, what does the contracting authority actually want to buy, and how can you do this. Sometimes there is also a draft of contract and so on. The reason why I'm saying all this is because this portal basically is the only place where you can find those information. and it's the only and one place where you can submit your offer, talk to the, actually not talk to, but communicate with the client. Of course, everything goes electronically. And if you ask me to compare it maybe with how was it a few years ago, we needed to compile like a huge pile of different documents and send it by post. So these were like documents of 100 pages or even more. But we really, I think we really went quite a step ahead with this, and now everything can be done online, and the administrative burden is getting really smaller and smaller. So in terms of bidders, this is really positive, and it really makes your life easier when it comes to preparing, for example, one proposal. Okay, now I went back to the main page. So on the left side, you can see what is already published. On the right side, with this prethodna savjetovanja, you can actually see what are, let's say, what are these some prior information about some of the procurements, and these are usually the money-wise bigger ones. And there are also this procurement plans, which I mentioned, where everyone can actually follow what is going to be procured by each of our entities. So all of our public entities are by the law obliged to prepare this procurement plan and to make it transparent, so actually to publish it here. I mentioned that if you want to enter this procurement platform, you have to be actually registered. You can register and see these documents for free, but if you want to submit a bid or go or communicate with the potential client, then here are some details. You have to actually pay some fee, which is not that big. So for one user, it's around 1,000 kunas, which is, and this is for the year. So it's not that big. This was a bit of advertisement for our procurement portal. But okay, I will now jump back to the presentation. Okay. So now we went through what is being procured and where to find this information, and I can tell you that this information is really relevant. As I told you, all the public entities actually have to submit their procurement plans. They have to submit whatever they're buying in terms of this, I will say, these thresholds that I mentioned in the beginning. They have to submit it on this procurement portal. So as I already told you, my daily work is to, with the coffee in the morning, I jump to this page and see what is going on and what can we procure. And I'll also look for the PwC, for example, each morning, if there are some services that we can provide to our public sector clients. So now the question of participation. So how can anyone take part in a public procurement procedure in Croatia? A very important thing is that procurement in Croatia is based on the principle of freedom of movement of goods, freedom of establishment, and freedom to provide services. This means that individual entity, which can be established anywhere in the world, so you don't have to have a company in Croatia to take part in the procurement process in Croatia. You just have to be registered as a company, and you can even individually submit an offer if you can prove whatever the contracting authority asks for. One of the, let's say, basic information they're asking for is the proof, or actually for you to say, to confirm that you have paid taxes and contributions in your own country, and there is no criminal, or there is clear criminal record for the company and for all legal representatives. So these are the basics. Of course, you can also submit bids and take part in the procurement process together with another company, which makes you a consortium of the companies, or but in that case, you have a shared responsibility, of course, for the contract implementation by the Croatian law. So there are many different ways. You can also have subcontractors. You can rely on some resources of some third entity. So there are many different options. And as I said, it's really not unusual for foreign entities to take part in the public procurement processes in Croatia. And I can tell you that some of the biggest, I would say, procurements were won by external companies. For example, even for the international companies, and for example, a company from China is building actually the Pelješac Bridge. So this is one of the probably most known examples. So now we kind of presented who can take part, where can you find the information, but how does it look like? So where do you start? How long does it take? When we talk about the public sector, we always think that it's a bit slower than the private sector, which is true. So usually when we're bidding, for example, in Croatia for some job, then it is really different. It can take from, I would say, 2 to 3 months up to sometimes even more than a year, but I will explain why. But now you can see the timeline, which is around 6 to 7 months. So this would be an average. I showed here what are the steps and how do you come from these from the process of when you hear about one's procurement that is going to be implemented until the contract implementation. So in the upper part, you can see what are the steps that client takes, and the lower one, you see what are the companies doing and what is their part of the job. So the client is actually starting the whole process with market consultation. So in order to prepare a good procurement document and to get really the best value for money, they have to make market search analysis and market consultations. This is actually by Croatian law. They're obliged for some amounts of money to make official and transparent and 5-day at least market consultations, which is also published online on the platform that I've shown you. And all interested entities have then they can see the documentation and they can give their suggestions for the requirements that the client is asking. You can discuss, you can even give some, for example, if some article in the draft contract is not really according to what you would like to sign, maybe you can give the recommendation to change it or to add something or so on. So this is really important part of the process because it gives potential bidders, so companies, it gives some space to have an influence on the whole procedure and the whole documentation, and it's really done transparently, because after you send your requirements or your ideas to the client, they have to prepare the report and again publish it on the website I already shown you. So the next step is call for proposal. So when they see what are those suggestions, they can either take them into consideration. So sometimes they put them in the text of the tender documentation. Sometimes, if they think that this is not according to what they would like to have, they have to write why do they think so and why is this okay, and supported, of course, with some articles from the law. And then we start with really tendering process. The most common one is the open procedure, where our clients actually, or contracting authorities, they publish the documentation on the electronical platform, and approximately this process is open for, let's say, 30 to 40 days. And in that point, then we step in and prepare. So companies prepare their proposals. There is also some space to ask a client some clarification of this documentation and so on, and submit the documents online. Next step is evaluation, which is done by the client, and they have the evaluation committee, which assesses all those proposals, and it can take sometimes even up to 3 months, because they can ask you also for some clarification of your proposal. But what cannot be changed is, of course, the price that you have submitted. This is really strict in terms of our local law. What is maybe important to mention here is that in terms of the online submission, as I already mentioned earlier, this administrative burden is not so big, because we have one form which is actually which replaces all these documents from the tax office, from the court registry, non-conviction statements, and so on. So it's one document where you basically tick the boxes whether you have it or not, and only if you are the best, I would say, the best bidder, then the client asks for this additional documentation. So it really makes it easier for you to submit this bid and to prepare it. You can basically focus on the price and maybe the quality of, depending on what you are bidding with. Yeah. The decision and minutes are available online, and you can even, as a bidder, you can actually ask for to see other bids, because of this appeal process that is written under, as you can see, which is quite often in Croatian public procurement. So if you think that you are the one that was supposed to win this and to win the contract, or you think that the process was not maybe transparent or something, you have a right to appeal, and you can use this. And it's really, I would say that entities that are bidding in Croatia are using this quite often. And the last part, so which is, I say, it takes 1 month usually to agree on the contract content and to sign it from both sides, and then it starts the implementation. In terms of the forms and contents of the proposal, so this is the small part which the client or the bidder prepares. So it has few parts. So as I said, there is a financial proposal, and financial proposal in Croatian procurement is always submitted in Croatian kunas, and financial part of the proposal is always subject to evaluation. So when it comes to evaluation, our clients or contracting authorities, they can actually decide whether they want to use this financial proposal to give more points on financial proposal, or maybe this the others, I would say, quality part, which can be either your expert team if you're providing services, or maybe your product, or time to implement something, or additional guarantees that you can give. So this is always a combination of this financial proposal and the quality. In terms of administrative part of the proposal, as I already told you, basically we have this one form, and maybe for the people from the EU countries, it will be well, they might know about this one. It's a standardized form where you just tick a box, and it really makes your life easier once submitting a bid. Of course, when it comes to selection evidence, you cannot just tick a box. You have to provide real evidence So that might be, I don't know, CVs from the experts, or some statements, or some official documentation that is actually a proof of something that you are providing as part of the bid. And the last one, this gray part, the supporting documents are only requested from the entity which has submitted the best proposal. So again, this makes administrative burden a little bit less focused on all bidders, but only to the one who is actually getting the contract. There are a few specific things when it comes to Croatian procurement, and I actually put them here on this slide. Those are related to guarantees, contracting, and appeal process. In terms of appeal process, I already told you what is more or less the practice. It is very common procedure, and there is one body that is dealing with this. And the most common appeals are submitted in relation to either procurement documentation and decisions about the winning bid. But this is something that is really, that takes maybe a month or something. So those processes are not really long, and they don't take a year or something. It's usually a month or two, and then they're actually, they have the decision and the process continues. When it comes to guarantees, they're very actually common for all the bids, and you as a bidder, you have to somehow guarantee for the bid that you're submitting, so for the price that you're giving, for the product that you're providing. So you have to, usually the contracting authority asks you for a bid for guarantee for the bid. It is about 3% of the procurement value. So you can either provide a bank guarantee, or you can provide the contracting authority with a financial deposit, which is returned back if you're not chosen. If you are chosen, then it is you can get it back once signing the contract. Moreover, there are guarantees also for the implementation of the contract, and some others for the rectifying defects within the warranty period, but those are really common, and they're not so financially, I would say, big. They're usually up to 10% of the contract value. And in terms of contracts, there are usually in Croatian. The liability unlimited. There is an unlimited liability of contractor, but this is also according to the local laws, unless it's said a bit different in the tender documentation. Amendments that are made once the tender is published, they cannot be made after. Sometimes yes, but this is, I would say, it's a little bit gray area. And all contracts can be annexed, but in terms of price, it can only be additional 30%. So just for you to get an overview how this goes. What does PwC do in terms of this? As I already told you, my background is, I would say, a bit different. So I've worked both as a bidder, and I'm doing this for the PwC at the moment. But I've also worked as in supporting clients to prepare this document. So in terms of preparation, and in terms of helping out to maybe to you or to other companies that want to bid in Croatia and want to take part in the public procurement and maybe find their interest in the procurement in Croatia. We have several services actually which we provide, and how do we help? First of all, I mentioned that all public entities prepare their actually kind of a pipeline of procurement plans. So we can actually see what is going on and what is going to be procured for different industries, for different areas, and we prepare those pipelines. For example, if you're coming from the, I would say, from the healthcare industry or from the healthcare sector. And then we, for example, prepare a pipeline of opportunities in that sector. And together with some market analysis of the respective industry. And so we can tell you actually what was the situation in the prior similar procurements, who is the competition, what are the prices, and so on. And you can actually see what are the procurements that are going to happen and what are their values, and more or less when are they going to be published. Of course, if there is a particular tender that you're interested in, then PwC makes the analysis of procurement documentation. So we go to the site that I showed you, the electronic platform for the procurement. And we basically go through all the documents and check them in relation to procurement law, as well as your capacities to provide that service and all relevant information that would help you to make the final decision whether you will want to pursue this opportunity or not. Also, I know that for foreign companies, it's really important for them to get some information regarding the local law and how it implies on them. So this is also part of this, I would say, second step. The third step, of course, if someone decides on pursuing the opportunity, is actually preparing the proposal. And we are leading the client through the whole bidding process. We prepare and translate all documentation because, again, as I told you, everything is in Croatian. And we lead the client in the communication with the contracting authority. We prepare the questions, clarifications, and the whole bid in the end. And the last actually, I would say, service, which is not maybe always the one that we want. This is appeal process, not from the PwC side, but from the client side, because we work not only on preparation of the appeals, but also we work on the appeal replies. For example, if our client is the one that won this tender, then we help them kind of how do they reply on the appeal that was given from the other side. So basically, it's kind of a complete service. So leading from the pipeline of opportunities and seeing what is there for you until the if happens appeal process. I would stop there, and I will now leave the floor to questions, and I will be actually very happy to answer on those.
Excellent, Jelena. There are a few questions that come in, and I've got a few questions as well. So let me just start, and we'll jump all over different parts of your presentation here. Mm-hmm. Undoubtedly, you talked about the different thresholds. What about in terms of value for public procurement? But there's a smaller threshold below 200,000 kunas. What about that?
Exactly.
So that's when I say 200,000 kunas, that's about just under 30,000, 25,000 euros, something like that.
Yes.
How does that function?
Exactly. Thank you, John. So this was on our first slide, and basically you can see that all the information that I now provided you with are for the goods and services that are higher than this fees. The reason behind is because they are transparently published. So we know that from these values, they are transparently published on this platform. The lower fees, for example, if entity wants to procure something for, let's say, 10,000 euros, they can do it, but it's more of an on-call procurement, because sometimes it really depends on the internal act of the institution. But they mostly have the rule that they ask for 3 bidders. So they send emails to, I don't know, for example, when it comes to our services to PwC and to similar companies, and then they ask for proposals from their side. So there are some rules, but they are usually not published officially and transparently on the platform. Sometimes there are, but this is really something that we can just, we cannot predict.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions that come through from our people watching. One is actually, I think it's a very good question, but it's where do you find out data on which companies and from which countries that won previous tenders? Is that available?
Okay, I will just jump on a little bit. I will show you exactly where you can find it. So you remember that I showed the platform. I hope everybody sees it.
Yeah.
So in the platform, and I'm to be honest, it is in Croatian, but I would really love it to have it also in English, because it would make our market even more competitive. You have part which is called Registri ugovora, which basically contains all the contracts that were signed by each. I can go here, so you can find it by the, for example, contracting authority. If you want to see who signed the contract with, if you're, for example, if your wanted client is Ministry of Health, then you write here Ministry of Health. Okay, and then you search. So I will show you now an example. And you can, I don't know, put one time from to the dates, which time would you like to see? Okay, we don't have any. Oh, we have, okay. And then you can see what were the contracts that were signed for the Ministry of Health and what's the name of the contractor.
And the amount is there as well, of course. Yeah.
Exactly, you can see everything. You can see when was it signed, how long will it take to implement it, what's the price, and so on. So as I said, again, it's really, really transparent. I would say the only minus is that it's only in Croatian, but again, we're here to help in that case.
Okay. Another question for you, also I think a very good question. Does the Croatian procurement system use a shortlist like the EU procurement does sometimes?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. Thank you for that question. There is a process of selection of shortlisting candidates, but I would say it's not the most wanted one from the side of our contracting authorities. Sometimes they do that, but I would say it's maybe few percent, up to 5 to 10 maybe percent of the whole procedures are done like that. So shortlisting is not something that is really in our procurement, but I'm actually, I can tell you from the point of view as the World Bank is doing the procedures like that, and I think this is really a good way to find and to, let's say again, to help with this administrative burden and to find really the best bidder.
When you say 5 to 10%, is there any particular types of procurement where we would see that, where you'd have a short list in Croatia?
Usually there is no actually some rule about these procedures. I can tell you that maybe a lot of, as I said, a lot of projects, a lot of this procurement are done with the EU money, and that's on one hand, and the other one is again our local budget. But I will tell you that all the authorities that are actually controlling how is this money spent are really more open to this open procedure, which does not include this shortlisting. I can give you an example. There was, for example, for some specific works or maybe for some specific services, this is done, but in general, no.
Okay. Another interesting question in terms of the guarantee. I got a question: how soon do you receive the 3 to 10% procurement guarantee if you're not the winning bidder?
So if you're not a winning bidder, the contracting authority has a limit of 1 month after the contract signature with the preferred bidder to return those guarantees. Yeah,
1 month. That's quite long, actually. That's there could be some interest on that.
Yeah. Well, but again, in practice, I can tell you from practice that it really depends. Sometimes they do it right away, so once they do it the other day. But sometimes you even have to send emails and to remind. But again, it really depends on the contracting authority.
Okay. Interesting enough. Now, you're saying you monitor this daily, and you saw today we had 40 different procurements. And it's interesting to see this. Are we expecting a lot more to be coming out in the coming days, weeks, and months, considering we're getting closer to the EU funds being finalized for 2021 to 2027?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I would say that it really depends on a few factors, but I would say that EU factor is quite big now, and since we're expecting money from the EU to come, let's say, in the second part of this year, we're expecting a huge boom when it comes to procurement in Croatia. So I would say that this will double for sure. As I said, I think that most of the contracting authorities are now waiting to see what's going to happen with the EU money, because we're still waiting for some strategic documents to be published and to be actually read and confirmed by the EU Commission. So I think that contracting authorities are now a bit conservative when it comes to planning the procurements, because again, they're waiting to see how much money will they get. Will their proposed projects actually be financed from the EU? And if yes, then they're going to I would say, jump on it and to probably to publish it in the second half of the year, and then in the next years as well.
Question for you as well. In terms of the public procurement process, I mean, I alluded to the fact that it's a chance for the private sector to gain money or get involved in, but I imagine we've also seen public sector entities also compete in the public procurement.
Mm-hmm. That's true. To be honest, I'm going to tell you about this from the perspective of a bidder, and that's definitely true. Public entities are sometimes being even our competition. So it can be really hard to beat that because of the prices we have as a private sector in comparison to the public sector. I really have to be honest about this with you. But of course, also public sector has to be really careful about it, because they have to think about the conflict of interest. So it is sometimes it happens. So public sector sometimes really bids. But it's not the rule, and I would say that mostly because of their capacities. I'm going to tell you about. It's usually common for the services, so maybe because and probably because of their capacity, they're usually going and they're forming consortiums with the private sector. So on one hand, I think it could be an opportunity as well for the private sector, because some of the public sector entities have really good experts and expertise in very specific areas. So it can be a good mix, actually.
It can be. I mean, I don't want to allude to think that if a public sector entity is bidding that they're going to win for sure. Okay, but
yeah. Well, a process is transparent, so everybody has the same chances. That at least it should be like that. Again, as I told you, it's always not only the question of quality, but the question of the price. So I think they come to the financial proposal from a bit different perspective than the private sector. So this is the only difference.
Yeah, and that's a big difference. Now, you mentioned decision minutes are available. Okay, what can we expect to see in these minutes? Can we expect to see, the reasoning behind the decision, or is it purely black and white? This is the entity that won, and that's it. I mean, what do we gather from this?
Actually, that's a really good question, and this is why I mentioned also the appeal process, and I'm going to tell you why they happen very often. So the minutes of the decision of the whole evaluation have to be really detailed. So the contracting authority has to say why someone was better than the other entity, and if they think that someone did not deserve maybe the same amount of points as the other, they have to elaborate why is that. So everything has to be really transparent and has to be really elaborated. And when it comes, of course, sometimes we have minutes which are not really detailed, and then we have this opportunity to submit an appeal and say, okay, but this process was not transparent. And then the State Commission, if this is the case, says, okay, fine, we are returning the process again to the evaluation part, and the contracting authority has to really give a detailed analysis of what they have done during the evaluation process and why have they chosen one over the other bidder.
Have you seen a case where there's been an appeal and the original decision has been overturned?
Yes, of course. I would say that it happens not in let's say 20 to 30% of the cases, because sometimes, and this is why the market analysis part is really important. So sometimes the client is looking for some services or some goods or let's say some suppliers that are providing with very specific things, and they maybe don't have the expertise in their evaluation committee that could know what could be the best for them and what would be the best bid, and then they make, let's say, the wrong decision. I wouldn't say it's on purpose, but sometimes even because they don't have maybe the specialist in the team, or sometimes they just don't make the evaluation according to law, not because they don't want to do that, but maybe because they're not so experienced, because we have some contracting authorities, big contracting authorities, such as, for example, the town of Zagreb, which is the biggest one and has most of the procurement, I would say, in terms of value, has the biggest number of procurements, but we have some of them that are procuring maybe few things during the year. So when they end up with the big project, if they get, for example, EU funds, they can, I don't know, maybe misunderstood a part of the law or something, so they can actually make the wrong decision, and that's definitely not on purpose.
I mean, I don't want to allude to that, but do you think there's sometimes an element of corruption there, or a favorite bidder for whatever reason that they're trying to align with? Okay,
of course, the contracting authority has the right to, for example, as I already said, they usually combine the price with some quality, and they have their freedom to decide what would be that quality part. And sometimes it's really difficult, and this is especially when it comes to services. We can, for example, see that as PwC when we're looking through the documents and so on. Sometimes when we're reading the conditions for some experts, they can be really difficult to reach. So of course you always have some, you can think, okay, this might be, they may have preferred candidate, but again, they cannot go, they cannot be above the law. So the contracting authority have to really obey the law, and you always have this appeal possibility. And again, you can always maybe find the experts or someone that could actually fulfill the criteria.
Yeah, speaking of experts, I mean, and I think we want to emphasize the fact that it is meant to be a very transparent process. but I know that times it gets down to very little minute details that could disqualify a bidder if they're missing one CV or one element of the proposal documentation. I've heard of this, even in recent cases with us where this has happened.
Yeah, well, when it comes to preparation of a bid, of a proposal, you have to be really careful about that. There are certain elements of the bid that cannot be changed and cannot be asked additionally. At some points, when it comes to services and when it comes to CVs, those are definitely one of them, because you have to prove that the person is actually has that experience or whatever is asked. So yes, you can be disqualified if you don't submit some parts of the proposal which are obligatory, I would say. But if there is something within those documents that is maybe missing, or it's not clear enough, or even some additional documents that would prove what is already written there, then the contracting authority actually asks for and has to actually ask for additional documentation, for clarification, and so on. So it's not so easy to be disqualified, but you definitely have to know the local law, and you have to be aware of these things.
Would it be fair to say, and there's a question about this, and we've been kind of touching on it, but the quality of the bid versus the price that goes with it, is it usually clear what weight each one of these has in the process?
Yeah, it's always clear. So the tender documents tender documentation has to indicate how much, so what percentage goes to the price and what goes to the quality. In terms of the law, like one of those criteria can have maximum 90%. So you cannot decide on the basis of, for example, of the price only. So it can be 90 toward 90 to financial part and 10 to the quality, and vice versa. But it cannot be 100% of on just one criteria. Okay. But maybe I can tell you that in practice, this is really tricky because everybody, there is a limit. Let's say a limit usually in the quality part. So everybody wants to have the best. So everybody everybody tries to have tries to have the best offer and tries to reach the maximum points as indicated in the tender documentation. So it often comes, if everybody has the same, let's say, quality, that the price is the one that is actually winning part of the bid. Okay, I mean, but again, that can be transparent, and we'll see it for a minute. But I think exactly, yeah. Just a couple more questions, just around the process and your thought. And when I say process, you refer to foreign bidders, and of course our audience, we're looking, that's going to be the big interest here. And you mentioned that there have been projects, including the Pelješac Bridge, where the Chinese consortium won. That was, you mentioned 3.2 billion kunas from EU funds, which is over 400 million euros. That's a huge sum of money. Couple questions around that. Has there been, apart from that, has there been a history of foreign bidders winning? Okay, and clearly you've made it clear to me that the project sizes in public procurement vary from very small amounts to huge amounts. Right, but they're all subject to the same rules, basically, if we're talking about 200,000 kunas and above, right? So yes, when it comes to foreign bidders, I can tell you from our experience as PwC and the projects that we're working on, definitely, foreign bidders are winning and winning the contracts. And for example, not even when it comes to supplying, so services in terms of some supplies and equipment and so on, which is, I would say, a bit easier because you don't have to know the language and so on. You just deliver the equipment. But also when it comes to services, so in terms of the really expert part of the whole project or some service that they're providing, and they come to Croatia. Not at the moment, of course, they're working electronically, so online and so on. But yes, there are many examples where foreign companies and foreign experts have been chosen to as the best bidders and are implementing projects and supplying our contracting authorities. And yeah, and when it comes to the amounts, yeah, exactly. It really doesn't matter whether a project is, whether the tender is, for example, 200K or 200 million K. They all have the same rules, or I would say similar, but for, let's say that in general it's basically the same, and they have to go through the whole procedure. The only difference would be maybe in the ones that are of a lesser value, they're usually shorter, so they don't last for maybe half a year or even a year. They last maybe 2 to 3 months. But when it comes to the other question and other aspects, yes, they're basically the same rules apply to that.
Another interesting question: will the earthquake repair bids be on Oglasnik?
Sorry, can you please repeat the question, John?
Will the earthquake repair bids also be on Oglasnik?
Of course, those are public. This is the public money, so we want our this is our money and EU money again, and we want it to be spent transparently. So yes, they have to publish it online on this webpage that you're looking at. Of course, only if those amounts are going to be smaller than this 200K or 500K when it comes to works, then this doesn't have to be the case. So they can, again, as I mentioned earlier, call maybe 3 bidders and ask for their proposals.
Okay, yeah, but I would expect these to be relatively, more expensive projects, I think. And
yeah, this should be. Yeah, this should be.
Yeah. In terms of that, which is a good question, and it was kind of leading to where I was going to go to next, not necessarily earthquakes, but future procurements, where do we really expect them to be coming from in terms of, or going to? Is it going to be construction, infrastructure, digital transformation projects, green climate? As you mentioned, a lot of public procurement comes from EU funds, but not all of it. Okay, some comes from the state budget. Some could come from other, international financial institutions like World Bank or European Investment Bank. So, keeping that in mind, but with the EU funding coming into place and probably playing a more significant role, do we expect the procurements coming more into these areas that I just mentioned?
Exactly. Probably the biggest part of the money, apart from national budget, comes from the EU. Of course, there, as you mentioned, World Bank, EIB, and so on, but those are really small portions, I would say, in terms of the whole budget. When it comes to the areas, we're still kind of in a process of planning the next period, but definitely infrastructure is going to be one of the top priorities. And the reason behind the building our infrastructure is because we still have a lot of work to do in Croatia, and I think that from the side of this, from the planning side, this is going to be very important. But even more important than that are digitalization projects, so digital transformation projects, green and climate questions, and I would say they're going to be horizontal. In terms of whatever is going to be done, even when it comes to infrastructure, the infrastructure will have to have the elements of green, and it will have to be those questions will have to be in a way horizontally aligned with all the investments that are going to be made. In terms of digital, which is very interesting, digitalization and then digital transformation projects, we are still actually waiting there is a plan actually to prepare the plan for digital transformation of Croatia. So we're still waiting for that plan to see exactly where the money is going to go. But from even now, from this point of view, we can see that a lot of money is going to go for these processes and for the digitalization of the whole business processes, for example, of the public sector.
I want to ask a question about. It's tied to EU funds, but looking at the public sector, right? So we had a webinar on EU funds a couple of weeks ago, but one of the hot topics this week in Croatia has been the actual allocation of EU funds to the government. Okay, so the public sector, there's a huge amount of funds we know are coming, and this is going to be supporting public procurement, but how much of it will be going? The initial allocation, and of course it's not final yet, they have to finalize that by April 30th, but the initial allocation towards the public sector is some 70% of the EU funds. What do you think about that, Jelena? You think that's the right way for the government to go on this? It's kind of directly related to public procurement, and it will increase obviously the overall budget of public procurement, but is that really the way it should go, or should there be a more fair allocation between the private and public sector?
Actually, you're really right, John. This has been a hot topic these days in Croatia, and I can tell you that the private sector is really. It was also all over the media. You can see that the private sector is really not happy with this plans that the public sector is getting most of the money, but this actually goes only in the way, and it's only when it comes to this recovery and resilience plan, and the money that is being now used for the actually to let's say for the consequences of the COVID pandemic. From my point of view, private sector is the engine, of the whole of the country. So I think that the allocation for the private sector should be bigger. But on the other hand, I think that the private sector will also have some, let's say, some opportunities when it comes to this money, because public sector will be, let's say, a direct beneficiary and will get this money. But then again, they're going to ask for external companies to implement maybe some new softwares for digitalization. They're going to ask for different suppliers. So all this will definitely be private sector. So yes, there is at first glance, there is not much money for the private sector, or at least not as much as we would like to have. But on the other hand, public sector will definitely have to allocate through public procurement a large part, I would say, of this money to private sector.
I think that's a great point, and that's kind of why I asked the question. I mean, it's been missed in some of the discussion is that the public procurement will benefit directly. Undoubtedly, there is the argument that if the private sector gets the money, that money, one kuna or €1 becomes 3 or 4 euros, whereas in terms of the public sector, yeah, they'll buy from the private sector, but will they actually generate that much more for the GDP? That maybe remains to be seen. It's arguable, but obviously, something that we can debate, and only the future will tell us what happens there.
Exactly. Well, there will be for sure, at least from what I've seen now from the media and so on. I'm quite sure that there will be more opportunities from the multi-annual framework, which is actually, we still don't know, or it's just starting to be programmed. So there is still a part of the money that a private sector will have a chance to get in the future.
Excellent. Well, I'll tell you what, I think we've come to an end with the questions. And if there's no more questions, I want to thank you very much for the presentation and obviously for your insight on the questions and other ideas here. If there's any final remarks you may have for our viewers.
Well, I will now share my my contact with all the viewers. I would be really happy if you would reach me with your questions. I'm here. Here is my email address. You can text me if you have any questions regarding the public procurement in Croatia, or the questions how to actually get involved in it. I am actually super optimistic when it comes to foreign companies and investments coming from outside Croatia, because I've actually I've been as being part of some projects. I've seen that this is possible and that it really gives an added value to the EU projects that we are implementing. So feel free to reach out to me. And even though, as I said, Croatian maybe is the official language, and I don't know how good you are with the language, I think this definitely shouldn't be an obstacle if you're thinking of involving within the public procurement processes in Croatia.
Excellent. Well, I think we'll leave on a good note. It's 7:15 local time, which means that Dinamo Tottenham started 20 minutes ago. So I also want to get to watch that game. It's 0-0 right now from what I'm told. So good luck to Dinamo tonight. And Jelena, thank you again very much. And everybody, thanks who's listening and watching. Thank you again. And look forward to seeing you guys again soon in another webinar. Bye for now.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.